Hi guys, welcome to my YouTube channel. In today's video, I'll be showing us how I make this Milkmaid crop top. Let's get into the video. I have 1 yard of this fabric and 1 yard of the lining and this elastic band. So that's what I'll be using to make my top. So because it's a crop top, I don't need a lot of fabric. If yours is going to be a full top or you are bigger, then you may need more fabric. I'll start by taking my vertical measurement and marking it on the paper. So my shoulder to bust length, shoulder to under bust, shoulder to waist length. So because mine is a crop top, the length stops at the waist length. But if yours is not, you need an extra length, which is the full length of the top. Next, I'll draw horizontal lines at those points I marked. I'll apply my shoulder measurement from the center front. My shoulder is 14 divided by 2. I'll apply 7 inches and mark it. From the shoulder point, I'll drop down by 1 inch and mark it. So once I mark the shoulder point, I'll go and mark the neckline. So my neckline is 3 inches by 3 inches. I would mark that and then use my curved ruler to draw my curve. Next, I'll connect my neck curve to the 1 inch drop with a straight line. Then from that 1 inch drop, I would mark my chest line. So the formula for getting your chest line is your round box divided by 6 plus 1.5. With my measurement, mine is 7 3/4. So I'll just mark that and draw an horizontal line across. At the chest line, I would measure the same shoulder measurement and then use the straight line to connect from the shoulder at the 1 inch drop to the chest line. At the chest line and the bust line, I will apply my bust measurement divided by 4. Next, I'll go on to create my darts. For the darts, I'll divide my bust span measurement by 2. So my bust span is 7 divided by 2 is 3.5. So I'll mark that measurement at the waist, which is also my full top length, and then I'll measure it at the bust length. At the bust length, I'll go down by 1 inch, and then I'll draw a line to connect my bust span from the 1 inch drop up to the top length. Next, I'll measure 1/2 inch at the left and at the right of the dart line, and then I'll use the ruler to connect from the 1/2 inch I've marked up to the top of the dart line. And then I just connected a straight line from that point up to the top of the bust line. The next thing I'm going to do is to apply my body measurement. My waist measurement is 28 inches. Divided by 4, that's 7 inches. So I'd mark 7 inches and then I would measure my dart. My dart is 1 inch and then I'll just add that to the measurement. And then I will just connect the waist to the bust measurement I marked initially. Next, I'm going to be I'll divide the armhole line I drew initially by 2 and mark the midpoint. At the midpoint, I'll go in by 3/4 of an inch for the front pattern, and then I'd use my curved ruler to draw my armhole curve. Because this Milkmaid top looks like a corset top, I'll be altering this pattern to a corset top pattern. First, I'll determine how high I want the top to be, so where I want it to start on the chest. So I wanted mine about 6 inches from the shoulder because I didn't want it to reveal any cleavage. So if you want yours lower, you can just take your measurement lower. If you want yours higher, be careful how high you make it, just so it doesn't look weird. So I marked my measurement where I was comfortable with it. I initially marked 5.5, but I decided that was too high, so I took it lower to 6 inches. Honestly, this measurement is at your discretion. At the chest line, I will go in by 1/2 inch. And then at the chest line again, I will go in around the armhole area by 1.5 inches. But if you're sewing for someone really busty, then you can go in by 1 inch. But I'll be going in by 1.5 inch for bust 37. Thing I'm going to do is to mark my corset cup. So I'll be connecting a curved line from the center front to the midpoint, so that's the dot line, and also from the side front to the dot line. I'll start with the side front curve. So from my 1.5 inch mark, it should touch the armhole all the way to the dot line. And then I'll do the same for the center front. So I'm starting from the 1/2 inch mark all the way to the dot line. Next, I'm going to draw my neckline. I'll be connecting from the center front all the way to where I marked where my neckline should start from to the armhole. And that is my corset cup. This cup area is what I'll be slashing and spreading to give me my Milkmaid effect. So I'm going to just cut out my front pattern, and then I'll use the front pattern to cut out my back pattern. I'll start by transferring my horizontal lines onto a blank paper so I can draft my back pattern. Next, I'm going to measure my zip allowance from the center back. So my zip allowance is 1.5 inches. So I'll measure that at the bottom and at the top and use a ruler to connect it. And then I'll go ahead to draw my horizontal lines on the back pattern paper. From the actual center back line, not from the zip allowance, I'll measure my bust span measurement, and that's 3.5, just as I had it in the front. I'm just trying to make my dot line. For this back pattern, I didn't bother doing the shoulder because I don't need it for the dress. I'll draw my bust span measurement at the waist and also at the bust line, and then connect it and then draw my dots just as I did for the front pattern. On the zip allowance at the waist length, I'll go in by 1 inch to give a nice fit at the back and you don't have bunching of the zip. So I'll connect the point to the bust line with a slanted line. Now that I have my zip allowance drawn, I'm going to use the front pattern to cut out the back pattern. I want a different neckline, so I'll just be tracing the armhole and take the front pattern off to draw my neckline. So I'll extend this line up a bit. The neckline of your back pattern is dependent on you, how you want it to be shaped. I initially drew a curved neckline, but I changed my mind and I wanted it straight. So I'm just squaring this up and connecting it to the center front as well. Next, I'll cut out the back pattern. The next thing I'm going to do is close the dots. So I'll split one of the lines open and then cover the dots. So I'll be using a masking tape to hold it down. Next, I'll cut out the front pattern. I'll cut the cup area out first, and then I'll close the dots for the front pattern and use a tape to hold it down. Once I've done that, I'll put that pattern aside and start working on the cup area. Before we start slashing and spreading, the first thing you want to do is determine how full you want your cup area to be. So that will guide how much you slash, how many pieces you have, and the space between each piece. I decided I didn't want mine so full. So after measuring across the cup, I had 7.5. And then I decided to split it 1.5 inches across to the end. So I'm marking 1.5 inches from the beginning of the cup to the other side. And then I'll use a ruler to draw straight lines across. So by the time I've drawn all my lines together, I have about 5 pieces. Next, I'll number my pieces to be sure which piece comes before which. So by the time I'm spreading, I'm spreading in the correct order. So I'm going to cut it all up now. Then I'll get a blank piece of pattern paper and spread it. So I'm trying to create a new pattern for the cup area. So at this point, the space between each piece is dependent on how full you want it. I don't want mine really full, so I'm just going to make it 1 inch between each piece. Slashing the cup area in 5 and spreading with 1 inch interval. This is what my result looks like. So if you want yours fuller than my result, then you can go ahead to split it into more places and spread with more space. So I'll just spread and then pin it down. And the next thing I'll do after I've pinned it down is to redraw my pattern. So I'll just be following this curve. Because you've spread it, some of it wouldn't align anymore. So I'll just be drawing and then like drawing the pattern as best as I can to get a curved line. So once I'm done doing that, I'll just cut it out, and this is my new pattern that I'll be using for the cupped area. So this is all the patterns I'll be using. The next thing I'm going to do is to transfer this to fabric. So I've cut out the fabric, and around on the sides I left 1 inch allowance. At the top I left half an inch allowance, the armhole half an inch allowance. At the side back I added back that 1 inch I took from the zip. I should have added this to the pattern, but it skipped, so I added that back. That's why the bottom side of the side back, it looks bigger than the top side. And then for the front, I didn't want the center to be straight, so I just made it a slight curve around that area. So yours can be however you want it to be. If you want it to be straight, then go ahead and make it straight. If you want it to be curved, if you want it to be rectangular shape, triangular shape, sorry, then go ahead to make that. And for the cupped area, I've added half an inch allowance around the sides. Now these are my patterns. I'll go ahead and draft the sleeve pattern as well. So for the sleeve, I've folded my fabric in for both sleeves on fold. So I have 16 inches width by 14 inches length. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'll take the back pattern and replicate the armhole on this sleeve. So I'll place back pattern and then draw the curve, but at the top the sleeve is going to be 2 inches higher because it is 2 inches that will fold to form the casing for the elastic band. So the other pieces, like the front, didn't have this extra 2 inches allowance because I'll be using lining to turn it. So the main body of the top, the front, the back, and the cup area are lined, but the sleeve is not lined. So I cut out the sleeve and this is what it looks like. Okay, so this is all the pieces I'll be using to sew my Milkmaid top. So I'll also be using this underwire to give me that cupped corset look. You can do without the underwire, but I just wanted it to have that structured cupped corset look. Now to the sewing. I'm starting with my cupped area. So the first thing I'm going to do is join each cup to the lining at the top. So I'll join it and then top stitch it. I'll do this for both cups. This is what it looks like. So the next thing I'm going to do is to turn it to the wrong side, and then I would measure 3/4 of an inch and then 3/4 of an inch down as well. So by the time I finish measuring it, I'll be measuring 1.5 inches. This is to make room for the casing for the rope, and also the top of the cupped area that folds gives that ruffled effect. So taking to the machine and sewing it with half an inch allowance up to the 1.5 inch, and I stopped there. And then at that point where I stopped, I'll use my scissors to notch it all the way to where the sewing stops. To the right side and then go and give it a good press. If you did it properly, this is what it should look like. The next thing I'm going to do is to mark my 1/4 of an inch allowance. So 1/4 of an inch and 1/4 of an inch, the two lines, because I'm going to be sewing on it first to create the casing. Forget it has that up area that is like ruffled up, and then it has the other side that there's a rope that goes through it. So I'll be sewing 2 lines to create the casing. So I'll just mark this 3/4 all the way and then come down again and mark another 3/4. So I have 2 lines that I'm going to be marking across the top of the cup. Next, I'm going to sew on both lines I've just drawn. The cup is beginning to come together nicely. Next, I'll go and sew this rope to insert in the casing I've just sewn for the top of the cup. So I've sewn it, and one end is open and the other end is closed. So what I want to do is I'll be using my safety pin to insert it into the casing. So I'll be pinning the open end and inserting it into the casing, and I'll just push it all the way to the end. Once it gets to the end, I'll take off the pin, take it to the sewing machine and sew it down. After I've sewn it down, the next thing I'm going to do is to sew a basting stitch all around the bottom of the curve. So that's the biggest stitch on your sewing machine to pull gathers. Then I'll pull out the threads gently to get the gathered look. While pulling the threads, I'm mindful of the measurements around the cup area that this cup is going to fit into. So I'll just take it once I've pulled a bit and then measure around, just try to fit it around the cup to see if I've pulled it sufficiently enough. Once I got the perfect size, I just put it aside to start working on the main body of the top. So this is what it looks like. The next thing I'm going to do is pick the front piece and the lining and join it by the midpoint just at the top. I'll just sew it straight, and then for the back piece I'll do the same thing, take the lining and the main fabric and sew the top together. So I've sewn it and given it a good press. So the next thing I'm going to do is to attach the front and the back by the sides. So I'll take it main fabric to main fabric and lining to lining. Using the allowance I left initially, I put in 1 inch allowance, so I'll just measure that across from the top to the bottom and then take it to the sewing machine and sew it. So I've attached the sides of the main fabric, front to the 2 sides. I'll just go and attach for the lining as well. So this is what I have. Next thing I'm going to do is to reach from the inside and then pull the bottom, the lining and the main fabric, and I'm going to sew from the beginning to the other side. After I'm done with the bottom, I'll take the zip allowance area and then I'll sew it down. I'll do this for both sides. The next thing I'm going to do is to attach the cup to the cup area. So I will pin it down first and then I'll take it to the sewing machine and sew it. And I'll do this for both cups. After sewing, I'll trim off the excess and then I'll use a bias to turn the cup area. You can either use the already made bias or you can make yours by just cutting a strip of fabric diagonally across the fabric. I'll take my bias and place it from the inside of the cup and then I'll sew it down. When I get towards the center front, I'll trim off the excess bias and then I'll fold it before I sew it down. So I didn't do that for the other side because there'll be sleeve attached to that part, so it's the armhole side, but this part at the center front I'll need to fold it down before I sew it down. After I've sewn it all the way to the end, I'll turn the bias to the other side and then I will sew it down. So I'll sew it down from this end to the other end. The next thing I'll do is insert my underwire. As you can see, my underwire is smaller than the cup area, so I'm going to just ensure that it covers the under bust, just to cover that, to get that cup area at the under bust. So I'll just insert it into the casing and ensure that I have it at the under bust area. If you don't have an underwire, you can do without this. I just wanted that cupped look. So once I insert my underwire and I'm fine with where it's positioned, I will just take it to the sewing machine and just lock to where it stops and where it starts, just so that it doesn't move around in the casing. Now I'm done with the body. What is left is the sleeve. So I'll just put this aside and start working on the sleeve. So the first thing I'm going to do is to prepare my sleeve by ironing the top. So I'll first iron 1/2 inch down and then I'll iron 1.5 inch down. Just as I did for the cupped area for the 1.5 inch. 3/4 is for the ruffled area and then the other 3/4 is for the casing for the elastic. I'll take it to the sewing machine and go and sew it at the splitting line and at the bottom. So I've sewn it, the casing for the elastic and the ruffled area, and I've also hemmed the bottom of the sleeve. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to insert the rubber into the casing at the top of the sleeve. To get the length it should be, I'll take the yoke of the front pattern, the part I cut out. So I have 5.5 here. So 5.5 times 2, that's 11 inches. So 5.5 for the front and 5.5 for the back. So I'm going to add 1 inch sewing allowance, so that's ½ inch on the front and ½ inch on the back. So what I'm trying to measure now is 12 inches. I'll just pull it till I get to 12 inches and then I will sew it down. For the bottom side, I'll be using this elastic, so I'll be sewing on it and then pulling the fabric. So that's just going to form that ruffled effect. You can either use this elastic thread or you can use this rubber. So it depends on what you're using. So I'll just start sewing and then I'll pull it as I keep sewing. I'm stretching the rubber to the highest limit it can stretch to, and then I'll sew on the rubber on the fabric. So that will pull the fabric to give it that ruffled effect. If this video has been helpful, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you're notified whenever I post a new video. So the ruffled effect is coming out beautifully. And this is what it looks like. So the next thing I'm going to do is to hem the sides together. After I've hemmed the sides, the next thing I'm going to do is to attach the sleeve to the body of the top. So I've coupled both sleeves, and the next thing I'm going to do is to attach the zip. So I'll go and do this off camera. If you don't know how to attach a zip, I have a video linked in the description box below on how to attach a zip. I have attached the zip and this is the final look. So we've finally come to the end of the video. I hope this video has been helpful and I hope it's been easy to follow. If you have any questions, please drop it in the comment section. If you would like more videos like this, you may want to watch my how to make a milkmaid dress video. Thank you all for watching and I hope to see you in my next video.